Obviously I am not David Green. I don't think it says David Green up there, so that's a good start. But my name's Ian Bailey, and I work with David at Insight 222, and I'm going to be hosting this panel in his absence, hopefully trying to live up vaguely to the amazing job that he would have done. So I will let each of our panelists introduce themselves one by one. But what we're going to be talking about today is how to build a data-driven culture in HR, and kind of talking a little bit about upskilling and capability building. So that's the area we're going to be focusing on. So I'll turn to each of our panelists in turn to just introduce themselves and then give us a bit of a feel for kind of why you feel this is a big challenge around creating this culture of a data-driven HR. So Hazel, let's start with you, if that's okay.
Hi, my name's Hazel Challenger. I'm an analyst, so I'm an operational researcher by profession. I've been working as an operational researcher in the civil service for over 30 years. At the moment, I'm working in the Ministry of Justice. For those of you that aren't aware of what we particularly do, we've got over 70,000 staff just around the UK, no international, and we deal with the prisons and the courts. We don't deal with the police. We're structured such that HR are a division in one business group, and all our analysts are in a division in a different business group. One may think never the twain shall meet, but 3 years ago I was tasked with building a data-driven HR. Off you go do it. So I had to move from sitting amongst the analysts to sitting in HR, which was a massive culture shock. And I think this is one of the things that is a major challenge for creating a data-driven HR culture, is you need your analysts and your HR people working together. They are very, very different types of people in the extreme, really. HR people are very people, and the best you can say is analysts aren't. So trying to bring these two very different cultures together is very difficult. HR work a lot on relationships and chatting to people. Analysts like to do their analysis, build models. In silence, please. Don't interrupt me. I like peace and quiet, focus. So trying to bring these two together is very difficult. And we've overcome this. There are some ways we've managed to overcome it a bit. But also the demographics are different. When I joined the Operational Research Service, I was the only woman. Women of my age are very, very, very rare amongst analysts. I've never worked with my gender peers before. I've never sat alongside them. Moved to HR, oh, wow. I may not be able to relate to the particular work they're doing particularly. I'm not a people person. But we would chat about things we had in common in our lives. It was the first time I'd ever had that. And I think this is one of the problems that exists in trying to bring these two groups together. Are they ever going to understand each other? I'm not sure, but there are things that we can do.
Very good. Steve.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Steve Scott from Lloyds Banking Group, where I lead our workforce analytics and strategic workforce planning teams. Now, we recently rebranded our team because I got tired of saying that. Head of strategic workforce planning, workforce analytics used to take up all of my time. So we thought, how can we create a name and a brand for our team that conveys our purpose? So we rebranded ourselves as Impact 16%. And they're not copying off Insight 222 in any way whatsoever. But we analysed our colleagues, and we could see that, on average, LBG colleagues were spending 16% of their lives working for Lloyds. And so we were trying to show our team and our stakeholders, our customers, that the purpose of our team was to drive impact during those 16% of our colleagues' lives. But we're a team of 20, and we have 70,000 colleagues, and I have 70 HR BPs there or thereabouts. And so we can see very clearly that in order to create impact, those HR BPs are our eyes and our ears. They're the ones that understand the business challenges, they can spot the opportunities, they've got the relationships with the business, they've got the reach across the UK. So I can't create impact without them. And it's quid pro quo. So as much as I need them to do what I want to do and what we want to do in the team, we can help them as well to look great in front of their business stakeholders. So it's trying to find that relationship where we both gain out of it. So since we've set up workforce analytics and strategic workforce planning, we've been really clear that we couldn't do it in isolation. We couldn't just sit as a team in a bunker with all the windows closed and the curtains down. We had to talk and build advocacy engagement with our HRBPs. And so for me, that's why developing a data-driven HR function is critical, because it's only through that we can create the impact that we seek to create.
Hello, my name is Brydie Lear. I'm Global Head of People Analytics at ING Bank. So I've had this discussion. I report to the CHRO. We've been on our People Analytics journey for around 5 years now. And I have to admit, we've become a little bit frustrated with this question. We've done a lot of efforts on a lot of different aspects. We've treated it like a big change program. So we've done a lot of education, a lot of awareness, provided a lot of tools, and we still don't see the shift. But then we kind of challenged ourselves and said, are we actually really clear on what a data-driven HR organization feels like, looks like, what's different? Have we done a good enough job to articulate that to our HR professionals? So we were really challenging ourselves on that aspect. And the second reason I think it's really hard is because it requires not only that kind of capability building and mindset shift a little bit for HR professionals, but it also requires us to deliver those data insights in a really simple, seamless, accessible way. The reason I've been thinking about that a lot recently is because we don't teach people to be data-driven when we launch a Fitbit, right? People just start using it. And if they don't know how to do something, they ask a friend or they look on YouTube and then they figure it out and they continue. And they just started using that information in their decision-making about their health. And I think that's where we need to get to in HR. We need to make it so easy for our HR professionals to use information in their daily work, and also our managers when they're managing their workforce, that change will kind of come.
Excellent. I love that. And so we were talking a bit about this earlier, the kind of Fitbit analogy. And I think part of that is about making it easy to use and simplifying everything. And another piece of it is understanding the why. Why should they even be looking at the data or using the data in a day-to-day kind of HR business partner's role? So Steve, to you, in terms of what you were talking about, I love what you were saying about the impact for the proportion of time that people are at work. So how are you trying to get that message across? Like, we've all agreed, I think, that this is difficult. So what have you seen work? Like, what have been some of the successes to try and start to convey that message?
Yeah, well, I think the starting point was the realization that we weren't trying to convert our HRBPs into data scientists.
Right.
I think Nikki talked about, we want them to go from here to here.
Yeah.
I want them to understand the potential use cases and value opportunities from workforce analytics. So understanding that I'm not trying to create 70 new data scientists was first. And then we created a program that we called Educate, Inform and Enthuse, because I didn't want it to feel, from their perspective, that they were just being lectured at. But you have to learn this. We're going to teach you about workforce analytics. Yes, there is some development opportunities around this, and we had to create some learning interventions. But above and beyond that, I wanted them to be excited, actually, about workforce analytics and what it could do for their roles, what it could do for their business areas. So Educate, Inform, Enthuse was the program. And that would include things like conferences. So we'd bring 40, 50 of our HRBPs to a single site for a single day and talk them through some of the steps of a workforce analytics project. We talked them through use cases that had been used internally and externally. We'd provide clarity on what their role was and what it wasn't, to bust the myths that they felt they had to become experts in data. Say, no, you don't. Just bring the use cases to us, understand the opportunities. We'll then work with you to co-create the hypothesis. We'll do the analytics, and then we'll work with you to co-create the actions and recommendations. We did things like, we had an accelerated development program which was targeting our HRBPs, and it wasn't just looking at data, it was looking at all of the new capabilities that they needed to develop to be HRBPs for the future. But rather than relying on our learning colleagues or external companies to produce the content, we put our hands up and said, can we write that content? Can we take ownership of the learning materials that we want to share with our HRBPs? Because that gave me control of how we were going to educate our HRBPs. And that tested our team. Thankfully, I've got some ex-teachers in my team, which was fortuitous. And we have colleagues in my team who've come from a learning background. So I could draw on their strengths and experiences to develop really impactful learning content. Then we have learning at lunches, we call them, where the colleagues can dial in and we'll do a 35, 40-minute WebEx using things like Menti to make it really interactive. Bite-sized learning periodically throughout the year for our for the ones that are really engaging it and want to kind of find out more. It's not they're not compelled, they're not forced to. And then one of the other things we've done is our kind of communication channels. We have an intranet site, and we can put up there snippets that we're kind of uncovering of insight internally. We can put things that we spot that our peers are finding, external research, just to get them, again, really engaged in what's going on in the wider world and within LBG. And we kind of supplement that then with champions. So we've identified champions within the HRBP population from each of the divisions. We have 12 divisions at Lloyds. And these are hopefully the people who are wanting to learn the most about this. This is a passion for them. They may have a data background. They may see this as a potential future career option for them, but they're really excited about it. So we want to work most closely with them, and we have these regular monthly meetings where we do deep drill downs into the ongoing work, the in-flight projects that we have. And the hope then is that they go out and cascade that message. They become evangelists for workforce analytics. And that's proving, how would I say, mixed results. So some of them come excited to be part of this forum. Others, I think, come because they've been told, you'll be our divisional rep. And we can monitor attendance rates and participation and impact that they have. And we have to have difficult conversations sometimes with the people directors for the division, say, look, we need to swap the champion, the advocate, because they're not advocating what we need them to do. So those are kind of the breadth of things. And I think it's the idea that there isn't a silver bullet. There isn't one thing that I can say, do this, and that will be the answer to all of your challenges. But actually try lots of different things, because people have different preferences, different styles. The hope is the more that you can do that's consistent in terms of its messaging, something will land with different parts of the population.
Excellent, thank you. And Brydie, I know you've come at this a few different ways. What are some of the experiences that you've had, or what have you felt has kind of worked in this space?
Yeah, I was already taking notes on new ideas. Thanks, Steve. So one of the things that really worked for us was as we grew in maturity in people analytics, and because of some of the challenges we've been describing, of course we do the education piece, but we also created a what we call a translator role in my team. I was of the impression when we first got started that HRBPs would do this. Yes, they can do this, but like we said, it's still growing in terms of their capability in asking questions and framing business problems in this way and translating analytical insights into interventions. So I have consultants in my team that bridge between my data scientists and engineers and the rest of the organization, both business and HR. And that's worked really well. So they have a kind of big five consultancy background. They're just experts in framing business problems and translating information into solutions. And that leaves the data scientists to focus on what they're really good at and making sure that they're focused on the right problems, right, that are going to have value. I think the second thing that I'm quite relieved about is at ING we've launched a analytics academy that's bank-wide. They've defined learning journeys, and we can really leverage off that. One of the things we're doing is putting our HR organization through the translator training. And in addition to the workshops, we will expect them to be a little bit like Steve described, experts in their local HR market or COE. And I've had a bit of a pivot in my thinking. I don't want them to just learn anymore. I want them to learn by doing. So after they do their training, they are expected to work in squads together with my team and develop analytical solutions. Either for their own market or business or across the board. But we've only just started on that journey, so I'll let you know if that works.
Yeah, and I think that's critical, right? That practical application. So like, how are you helping them understand the best ways to kind of apply some of these new skills? Kind of how are you setting that up for them?
You mean in terms of the training, or just
in terms of then taking that training, as you said, and applying it? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've defined a whole learning journey, but they do a case in the training. We've put an HR case in, even though it's standardized across all types of translators in the bank. And then we will do facilitated sessions afterwards, where we work on identifying problems, and then we will tackle them. I'm also loosely thinking, I don't know if you mentioned this at one of the last speeches, but I'm loosely thinking that maybe we should also organize them in analytical expertises. Mm-hmm. So this is the little talent analytics pocket within HR, or this is the reward analytics, so that they feel like they're real champions of a certain domain. But we're still developing our thinking in that way, to be honest. But for sure, I know that it's very difficult for our HR professionals to change the way they work unless they do an analytical exercise themselves, and they dive into something, or they solve a problem, or they use one of our solutions, because just going to a training isn't enough, which we all knew in HR, right? Active learning, we already knew this.
Yeah.
But, and so I think you can do, when you do then spot a success, it's really being public with that success and socialising it across the wider HRBP community. We had a great example where an HRB had identified a business problem with illness, absence in our contact centres. And so came to us and said, look, every year these two particular contact centres suffer from significant absence rates in the winter. And it really impacts the customer experience because we don't have enough people manning the calls. So we did some analysis, we did some work, we looked at some external data, and we offered a flu jab for all of these colleagues on these two sites. And a year later, the absence rates had dropped significantly. So these two contact centres have gone from the top of the league table in terms of absence rates to the bottom, even allowing for other kind of external factors. It would have been quite easy then to just moved on to the next project. But actually that HRBP had done exactly what we wanted them to do. They'd spotted a business challenge. They sourced us out to help them with it. They were integrated into the work that we did throughout. They were part of driving the actions, part of tracking the impact. And so we've made a big hoo-ha about that and trying to show the rest of the HRBPs, look at what you can do. Look at the business impact, because we've translated that improvement in absence, illness, to a pound. Look at the impact, the pound's impact of what Gemma did. And then there's a little bit of a competition that starts. Well, if Gemma can do it, so can I. And so it starts to foster that approach.
Yeah, that's excellent. No, and I think it's a great point, right? Sharing those success stories really help people kind of catch on. So Hazel, would love to hear your experience, given you talked about these two very different groups that you kind of experienced, and kind of what's been your experiences in trying to kind of drive this and think through this, and how much do you feel that there's education needed for on the HR side, but also for maybe some of the analytics teams as well, around really understanding the role of HR and the business partnering side of things as well?
When I first went across to HR to start this data-driven HR project, my then boss said that it's about education. You need to train all the HRBPs. So we set up training programs. It's amazing how many excuses you can find for not turning up to a course that you've agreed to go to. I had about 50% attendance rate for the good courses. You'd rearrange it for another day. I was only running Excel courses, and then we did some on the recruitment system. But it was always the same HRBPs that engaged and were willing to come. And I could just tell from talking to people, those that weren't going to come, some of them were terrified of numbers. They did not want to have to look at a number. It scared them. I don't think they got any maths qualification at all and had been told they were rubbish at maths. And once you've hit your 50s and you believe you don't understand numbers, it's very difficult to bring these people on board. So I sort of took two approaches, but mainly it was about building relationships with all these people, gaining their trust. And I suppose I became the translator, would be the formal word. I became their safe, friendly analyst, is how they would say it. So because they're good at networks, if someone had a problem, they'd ask their friend, and then their friend would say, oh, go see Hazel, she'll help you out. I would then link them in to the analyst with the data, or if it was an easy one, and I'd do it myself, and I would talk them through it and explain to them what could be done. If I knew that person was terrified of the numbers, then I made sure that when the numbers came through, I was there to talk to them about them. And so it's become very much about relationships. And as the people analytics team has built within HR, I've moved even more into that translator role. So if anybody because sometimes the HRBPs are told they have to go and get some numbers and they have no idea. No idea at all, don't know where to start, so they just come and talk to me. So this is the way that we've tried to set that up. I wish someone would come to me with the sort of problem that you're talking about, but they're not even identifying those issues from the standard reports that we are providing them. We have to go and look for them, and we just haven't got the resource to go and look for what their issues are. So we've got a long way to go, I think, in those terms, but we're trying to move it slowly on in other ways. But education for HRBPs with our current group is not really working. For the analysts, we need more translators. I don't know how you train a translator, really. I think you find some analysts have got people skills or can explain numbers and others can't. And I think we have to be careful that we don't try and that we don't lose the extreme expertise on either side. You know, our union negotiator needs numbers, but there's no point in picking a mediocre negotiator who's very good, who can deal with the numbers. It's better to have a brilliant union negotiator with some analytical support to help in the meeting. So I'm still in two minds about whether it's possible to raise the floor for some people. People do have number blindness. Or whether we should be just embracing the differences and making the most of the differences and helping to bring people together and help people to work together with trust and respect for each other's skills.
Yes, so that's a great point. Just a quick point, and then Steve, we can go to you. So, you know, we have this constant battle between how much do we need to develop the HR teams to be, you mentioned eyes and ears earlier, right, in terms of we can't scale to an entire organization with a people analytics team of 10, 20, 30, even 40 people, right? And so how do you empower HR, the rest of HR, to get that information out there, use that information to build credibility for themselves, add value to the business, but you can't expect everyone to become a data scientist at the same time. So, yeah, from your perspective, kind of where is that point?
So I don't want to worry about the bottom 5%, 10%. I want to worry about the 10% who are real passionate about this and want to become experts in this, if you like, within their role. And I want to worry about the middle, the big chunk, who I want to increase the data savviness of, if you like. There'll be some, I think you're right, you just can't get them over that line. And I don't want to sound kind of patronizing, but if it's just not them, it's just not them. They'll find other ways to add value in their role. They'll have other strengths that they'll bring to the party. And I just don't think there's any value in wasting my effort, putting them under that strain and that anxiety of learning something that is just not for them. The point I was going to make, though, I think, is that this has got to be two-way. Sometimes I feel that as people analytics functions, it sounds a little bit condescending sometimes. So we're the bright ones in the room, and our HRBP colleagues, we have to teach them about maths and Excel, and thank goodness we've got so much to learn from them, and we need to not let that kind of leakage of any condescending approach to their roles. I couldn't do their role; they can't do mine. We've got different backgrounds, different experiences. But your point about respect and trust is really important. So we're looking at how we can learn more from them. How can we shadow their roles and understand what it's like to walk in their shoes. And that'll help us better deliver for them, I think. So a lot of my team, they don't come from an HRBP background. They come from an analytics background. They have domain experience in terms of people data, but they've never worked as an HRBP. So trying to get that cross-fertilization of an appreciation for each other's perspectives. So can I put some of my team as an HRBP for a couple of weeks? Can we bring an HRBP into my team for a couple of weeks just to see what it feels like? And then that will help with the advocacy, the evangelism, going both ways.
Yeah, and you're more likely to then be getting the insights from the business and the problems from the business, which ultimately is crucial, right, for you to be working on the right stuff. Yeah. Okay, quick question, then I'm going to go to the audience, so please think, if you have questions, get ready. So final quick question from me before we go to the audience, what are some of the glimmers of hope? How do we know when this is working? Like you gave us a great example earlier, Steve, around sharing those success stories. Brydie, anything from your perspective around how do you know when this is starting to kind of take hold or work? How are you measuring success in this?
It's a really good question, and that was also part of the debate I had with my CHRO. But I think one of the ways in which I notice things are changing are spontaneous demand. So they're asking questions, they're seeking information, and I think when you're really starting to cook is if that's also coming from your business leaders. So if they're starting to understand the capabilities that HR has in terms of providing data-driven insights, that's when you're really starting to make a difference. And if they start trusting those in terms of their decision-making about their people, then I think you really can start to make a difference.
Yeah, excellent. Hazel, Steve, anything else on that one?
I'm measuring it through the quality of the demand that comes into the team. So as I'm seeing a gradual uplift in terms of the quality of the qualities, it's terrible, isn't it? Just said don't be condescending, and there I was. The quality of the demand in terms of the opportunity for an ROI. So what's the return on that request? As that's increasing, and I'm seeing a decrease in terms of lower ROI, let me call it that, requests, because they're able to self-serve those, then I think that's what I'm looking for. That's my evidence that we're getting it right. And we're not there yet, by the way, at all. But the more I can see that they can self-serve and they can identify the things that where we can add real impact through high-level economic, cultural ROI, that's the measure for my success.
Yeah. Excellent. Hazel?
When I identified what a data-driven HR should look like, I identified 7 strands of work that needed to be undertaken to get to where we wanted to be. So every 6 months, I then look at each strand and think, well, how are we doing? Where do we need to start doing a bit more work on something that's lagged behind? And I think I also then have the odd temperature check, like I was overjoyed when a woman who'd just taken over the apprenticeship area phoned me and said, I've taken over apprentices and I've got a load of data. Can we have a chat? And that before, 2 years ago, that would not have been her first thought, to come and talk to an analyst about stuff. But she feels she doesn't have to have a question to come and ask. She can come and ask just, can you give me a hand? And I think that is a real shift in the attitude of HR, that they don't have to have a question to talk to an analyst. They can just go and talk.
Excellent. Communication. It's a great thing. Wonderful. All right, so any questions from the audience? Yep. Just wait for the microphone if you would.
First of all, thank you guys for taking the time to do the panel. I think it's been really helpful. I think probably for a lot of us, this is one of the more challenging aspects of the people analytics journey. So we can always do some of the analysis, we can always engage with people, but I think trying to encourage others to do that and building that culture is definitely one of the more challenging aspects, at least from my own experience. So I guess, Steve, building on one of the points that you had just made around gauging your success whenever people are able to self-serve, when HR business partners are able to self-serve in some of those more, I guess, low complexity analytics issues. I guess, what's the role also of technology that you found in that? So, do you guys have relatively advanced platforms to help be able to assist in the self-service? If you do, have you found that those are actually, pretty effective in that? Because, we've got a whole bunch of vendors here. They've got very nice products for sure. But I think ultimately, if people don't use them, and if people aren't using them for self-service, then it's a massive investment that's not necessarily getting realized. Yeah. So I'd just be curious for you, and then for anybody else up there as well, what your experience is in that balance.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question, and I've looked at this both from the angle of tools and technology available to HRBPs, line managers, to help them self-serve, democratize analytics and data, and also for my own team. And when we kind of set off on our journey a couple of years ago, looking at firstly from our own team perspective, I kind of reached out to lots of vendors and I could see lots of tools that we could use. And I was seduced by all of that, but I thought it wouldn't be worth it right now. I need to build the inherent capability within the team first. Because if not, then they won't be able to leverage the value from the tools. And it's similar across then in looking at HRBPs. Yes, there are tools and technology there, but they're underutilized. They're implemented and there they are, but they're not fully embedded. And the support, I don't think, is always there to help people get the best out of them. So I kind of think, let's build capability first so that we can then harness what technology can offer, and for both sides of the fence.
Yeah, other thoughts on that one? No? Cool. All right. Any other questions in the audience? Go to the front and then we'll go afterwards.
So, really interesting discussion, and I think Steve will know it's one close to my heart. As our roles develop, we see people exit and we see that refresh. What do you do for your pipeline into a HRBP role to ensure that they're either coming in as data savvy already, so you're recruiting different skills than you had before, or they come in from day one and you have a program that enables them to build their skills?
Yeah, so Brydie or Hazel, if you want to take that one, given that.
Well, mine's short because we're just about to start thinking about that.
Brydie, anything you have in on that one?
We're going through an HR transformation. I guess probably everybody is. But part of that is that we're looking at, what does an HRBP role entail in the future? Because part of our transformation is kind of standardizing and outsourcing people operations. So part of that is that we've put data and analytical skills at the heart of all our job descriptions. I think you need to approach it like all workforce strategies, right? You need to educate, you need to hire for these skills, you need to put it in people's targets. All those levers you can pull to build this capability is necessary. And I was actually reflecting just before on when we were talking about this kind of capability building, because we all know that Google has 1/3 analytical people, 1/3 specialists, and 1/3 kind of HRBPs or translators. So I think also getting the mix in your organization so that we do still have that kind of social science, organization psychology background, which is so important in our HR domains, but also the other specialisms, as well as analytics, and maybe they're not all in the same personal profile. And I think we need to do a little bit more work thinking that through. And I noticed that the graduates that are coming out of HR studies, the graduates that are coming into our trainee tracks in HR, they have a much more analytical grounding. I think education's also helping because the universities are changing the way they educate people. But I don't think it's going fast enough. I think that's the frustration we're all feeling.
Yeah.
But I wasn't very popular when I suggested at my HR management team that we maybe need to change the HR population, not just develop it. So it's all in the right balance, of course.
I think the rise of the people analytics function in general and the news that's out there and that stuff is improving with that education and the student kind of sort of people that want to come into HR now that have more of a data-driven mindset as well, that maybe wouldn't have been attracted to it as a profession in the past as well. But I definitely don't think it's happening fast enough. Yeah, great. The second question there.
So just on that,
Steve.
Build on a little bit. So yes, I put my strategic workforce planning hat on. So yes, it was through SWP that we're able to identify that the changing capabilities in an HRBP population meant that data and assessment analytics was increasingly important. So yes, that helps inform them build and upskilling, reskilling, but to your point, it will also help in terms of the role profile when we go out into the market to bring new HRBPs in. And then just building on that slightly then, so this insight in terms of analytical capability, data savviness, it's not just HRBPs, it's across whole swathes of roles across our organisation, and I'm sure yours as well. And so that's trickling down into things like our graduate programmes, where we would traditionally go out and look for future leaders. Yes, we'll continue to do that, but we're now supplementing that by saying we need to go out and build a pipeline of graduates to come into our grad schemes who are bringing strong analytical capability with them. That's what they've done in their university courses. So we'll bring them in on a grad scheme and then we'll rotate them, and some of that time might be as an HRBP.
Excellent.
So it starts right at the
absolutely.
At the entry point. Yeah.
Great stuff. Okay.
Yeah, great input, everyone. I got a lot of ideas on what we can implement. I'm curious about how have you defined your service offering, both within HR and to the business? Because you earlier mentioned about ROI and picking up projects that are adding value to the business and are worth the time investment. But at the same time, you want to be helpful and you want the HR to become curious and look at data and take decisions. So when do you say yes? When do you say no?
Is that for me? We always say yes. No, we always used to say yes because we were in that stage where we wanted to build relationships and we wanted to build advocacy. And I think somebody mentioned it in one of the earlier sessions. You end up doing things that you know is not really core. And it won't have massive ROI, but it will have massive impact in terms of building that relationship with that people director or that business partner. Gradually over time, as I say, we're seeing now improving quality of requests and demands, and we're reaching the point that we've more demand than we can supply. So we're now able to say, look, we need to work together to assess, before we even start this project, what is the likely ROI? And that in itself is helping them to see that this is about business impact or colleague impact, but it's not about satisfying curiosity for people who just want to know what's this or what's that. So we're not there yet, but that's part of now of our kind of request process as it comes in. Yes, we're doing an ethical review with the HRBP, but we're also doing an ROI review. And we're not holding them to it at this stage or tracking it and measuring it, finitely, but at least starting to convey the importance of this needing to have an impact potential.
I'm definitely holding them accountable to it. We also use a set of criteria in which we evaluate the likelihood that you will gain business value from the project. Some of those are hygiene factors like data, legal, technology, access, those kind of things. But some of them are how aligned to the strategic priorities. What is the quantifiable value in terms of, risk, engagement, whatever it is. So that really helps, and we even sometimes formalize that, particularly with big projects that are going to take a lot of resources. We formalize that in a kind of charter, and that's also part of the education process for the subject matter experts, which can be a range from HR or other domains. So that really helps. But yeah, I don't see it as my job to educate HR. It's my job to deliver insights. So if I'm busy educating HR all the time, then I'm not delivering insights. So that's a really difficult balance to strike. So I prefer to work together with my HR Academy colleagues because they are much better at designing learning interventions than my data scientists. And we try to focus on just education within the delivery. And then they do the kind of formalized programs. We do a lot of awareness stuff, but and I definitely play that role in my HR leadership team. It's because that's really important from a strategic perspective, that they understand the potential value in this area, and it really starts at the top. Yeah.
I don't know if there are many public sector people here. Are there any?
Hands up.
Because I don't know if you struggled when they were talking yesterday about ROI. I was in the Republic of Ireland. We don't really... Sorry, we don't have a bottom line. Trying to define...
That sounds like utopia.
Oh, you try defining productivity when you are a service organisation. So we do have a balance between doing work sort of to build relationships. So we will do those, but as long as they're not taking too much time. But other stuff, it's not about the bottom line, it's whether the prisons are rioting. So if you watch the BBC News, you can guess what our focus might be. I was in Bedford Town Centre one day and all the blue lights started going to the jail. Unsurprisingly, the next day we were focused on prison officers, and within, I think it was about 3 weeks, it was recruit 2,500 prison officers and all the analytics you need to support that. Return on investment? But
that's value. There's huge value.
I would hope the population would consider it money well spent.
Yeah.
We have riots in contact centres as well. So
Excellent. Okay, I think we've got time for just one more question before everyone else comes in and joins us. Anyone else with a question for the panel? If not, I have a quick one that we can close on. All right, so quick final question. Where does the CHRO fit into all of this? They've kind of been absent from this conversation. So how important is that leadership role in kind of promoting this data-driven culture? Any kind of final thoughts on that? Hazel, I'll go to you first.
2 elements. One, making them turn up to things like training courses to encourage the reluctant. But the other is to provide us with the analytical resource. They've got the money or not got the money.
Yeah, absolutely critical to have support from CHRO. But I think also building on Brady's point, it's top down and bottom up. You may have the support from the CHRO, you're building the advocacy, the education, the informing, enthusing your HRBPs, but there's layers between them. And don't miss that layer. Your people directors might be your blocker as well. And that's a more sensitive challenge to address. But sometimes they can, they can unlock potential as well, because you want them to be not just a CHRO, but them advocating it into their teams as well. Yeah.
Great. And then finally, Brydie.
Yeah, so of course, I agree with exactly what they say. The CHRO is really important. I mean, analytics takes investment, whichever way you look at it, whether it's just time or infrastructure or education, it takes investment, so you need that support. My CHRO is quite a traditional HR leader. So it's not like he understands the intricacies of analytics, but he definitely understands the potential business value. And I think that's the most important thing, because he doesn't need to understand how we do our analytics. He just needs to understand the business value and then unlock the resources in the organization to make sure that we can create that business value.
Excellent. Well, huge thank you to our panelists today. Thank you, everyone. We'll be staying in this room for the next session. Thank you, guys.